Welcome to the Run for God Run Club, where you will find God in a runner's space.
Welcome to the Run for God Run Club. This is your one stop each week to be motivated and inspired to get off the couch and onto the running trail where you can, in turn, inspire others to do the same. Let's learn, laugh, and leap into running together, giving God the glory for all of what we're able to do in His name. Amen. I am your running host, Dean Thompson, coming to you straight from the Upward Studio. And we are going to talk today about we're going to continue in that same direction we've been on, right? Mm-hmm. Where we talked last week about starting over. Well, this week we're going to talk about not necessarily starting over, but changing direction. Mm-hmm. So kind of the same theme. And then I'm going to go and wade into some controversial waters by talking about one of the most controversial subjects that I can think of. And you don't want to miss that. So joining me for that and much more is Run for God founder Mitchell Hollis.
So are we running the risk of getting canceled with this topic? Because it's a hot button topic.
Yeah, I don't know. It could be. We'll tread a little lightly, but we'll see.
So how are you, Dean?
Good. What about you?
I'm good. It's getting hot and humid and the thick of summer. And but we were just talking about before the podcast started that this time of year, you see all kinds of wildlife. So we've had 3 bear sightings right here in our area just in the past few days, really. Actually, one of them was my aunt who lives just down the road from my house. She had one on her front porch.
That's crazy.
She was doing laundry or something, and she kept getting her notification from a Ring, and it said an animal is on your front porch. I didn't know Ring would do that. I didn't know Ring knew animals from people. Well, obviously it does. And she thought it was the neighbor's cat or something. So she went out to shoo it out, and she opened the front door, but she still has a glass storm door. She opened the door and was like, whoa.
There's a bear.
150-pound black bear on her front porch rug.
Wow.
But it sounds like it wasn't, of course, the bears around here, they're not really aggressive.
Yeah.
They're like big dogs around here, but still, it's a bear.
It's a bear.
So lots of wildlife running around. All the deer dropping their fawns right now, which is pretty cool to see. Yeah. It's a cool time around here.
Yeah. This is the time of year, too, where I last week, I did this training for this long race, and so my body was kind of out of sorts with where it normally is this time of year. And of course it's getting hot, and as it gets hot, it gets hard to run out there. And so I'm trying to get back into doing some workouts. And it's getting hot. And last week I tried it, and it did not go well. It did not go well at all. And so this week I thought I would try to do it in the morning. Mm-hmm. And we talk all the time about changing up things.
Sure.
And I did, and I went out yesterday morning early when it was like 59 degrees when I started. It was really nice, and success. I mean, it was a great workout, and it's amazing if you just change a little something every once in a while. And I don't like getting up and running in the morning.
Yeah,
but that changed everything.
So we were also talking before the podcast. I realized this morning that I have an addiction. I do, and I'm not proud of it, but I'm going to be very transparent on this podcast this morning. Yep. Yesterday afternoon, I started getting a headache, and I thought, I just never get headaches, and it was pretty bad. It was one of those, where it starts to cloud. You just feel like you're in a cloud, and it wasn't like throb. It wasn't like a migraine. It was just a dull, annoying headache. And so I took 2 Tylenol last night, and I went to bed. Well, I woke up this morning, and I still had it. It was like not bad. But then I got to thinking, I'm a coffee drinker. I usually drink 1 cup in the morning first thing, and then 1 cup about mid-morning. I don't drink a ton. But I did something yesterday morning that got me off my schedule. It wasn't my normal routine, and you know me, I'm a creature of habit.
Yeah.
And I didn't drink coffee yesterday. And so I went this morning and I fixed me a cup of coffee. Immediately, the headache was gone. And so I was having coffee withdrawals. So I guess I'm an addict.
Yeah. So are you going to change anything? Or?
No. I'll just go back to the 2 cups a day. And, because I love coffee. Yeah. I'm a coffee connoisseur. I like it black, and I I like the Costco brand.
Yeah.
It's the, you know, the real expensive stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. We had 2 posts from last week from the same person that I wanted to read them back to back because I like them, and that they come from, I'm assuming that her name is Paola Vasquez, but on Facebook it says Vasquez Paola. If I'm getting it backwards, I'm sorry, and if I'm not saying your name right, I'm so sorry. But she says this. Hello, everyone. This is my first post being part of Run for God, and I want to share with all of you something that the Lord put in me. Today, we were running. It started to rain, and I was almost about to stop and tell my partner to stop, but something in my mind said, this is like your life, and motivated me to continue. While running, I was able to enjoy the rain in a way I don't usually enjoy it. And that is like our walk with the Lord sometimes. We just need to follow and trust no matter the circumstances and know that God is with us at all times. Sometimes we think that the difficulties are obstacles, but we have to remember what God says in His Word. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love Him. Who have been called according to His purpose. That's Romans 8:28, of course. And that includes the parts that we sometimes see as obstacles. It is a pleasure to be part of this community where we can give God the glory by running for Him. And then a few days later, she says, it is the Lord who shows you what you're capable of in His strength. I never imagined running, and now I realize that in His strength, wonderful things happen. Today, in the 10K training, we completed our training of running the fastest by a mile, and she ran 8:45. And the Lord surprised me of what He has done with me. Glory be to His name. It looks like she's running with Rebecca McGeorge.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so she's. I don't. You know, I think her English is maybe a little bit broken, but it sounds like she's having fun. And of course, by the way, the Hawkins fundraiser is coming up. It's on the horizon. And if you want to support Row 12 Ministry, which is Rebecca's and her husband's ministry, then register for the Hawkins 10K. Yeah. And do it virtually. Do it however you can do it. But that would be good.
I think what she's getting at here is something that we talk about all the time, is our human nature is to avoid difficult things.
Yeah.
But we know that the magic happens when you do hard things, and I think that's what she's getting at here is she didn't want to run in the rain, but she did, and she realized there's a lot you learn there.
Well, you know what I noticed about this too is that rain. We look at that. You mentioned it was a difficult thing. Well, really and truly, that's the way we look at a lot of things. It's a difficult thing. Is running in the rain a difficult thing?
It's just perception.
It's exactly right. Yeah. It's not really. A lot of times we look at the things we say are difficult. They're really not difficult. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of going out there and doing it, right?
Yeah.
And she ran an 8:45 mile. A lot of people would be really happy with an 8:45 mile, wouldn't they?
I would be happy with an 8:45 mile right now. Yeah.
I love when we're surprised by what we do.
Yeah.
I'll never forget the Myrtle Beach Marathon back in 2013. I've probably talked about it on here before, where I went out to run a certain time that day, and I just remember feeling good the whole time. Ran my fastest mile, the last mile of that marathon, and just ran faster than I'd ever run before by, I think, 9 minutes. Mm-hmm. I was shooting for like a 4-minute PR and wound up with a 9-minute PR. And it just feels good when everything comes together and everything works and you do better than you think you can. It's really cool.
And talking about perception, this is something we talked about yesterday. We were talking about the concept of steps. A lot of people are doing steps nowadays, which I'll be honest, I've kind of fallen into the trap. I've figured out where the step widget is on my iPhone. Yeah. And it's like I'm falling into this trap along with a lot of other people. But we were talking about how many people out there are doing the 10,000 step challenge, which for most people 10,000 steps is about 5 miles. If you ask a person to get in 5 miles today, it's like, oh, that's the end of the world. That's way too long. I can't do that. Yeah. But for some reason, their mind is computing 10,000 steps. It's not the same, but it's actually exactly the same. So what do we learn from that? What number one, we were kind of kicking around ideas about having some kind of step challenge or step training in the future. That's nothing that's coming right now, but we realize that some people are motivated by that. What I learned from that conversation is use what motivates you. 5 miles is 5 miles. But if 5 miles discourages you, but 10,000 steps motivates you, then by all means use 10,000 steps.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, what is it? It's simply your perception.
That's right.
We perceive things as bad and good, and they can be the exact same things many times.
Or hard and not so hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or hard and hardcore.
Yeah.
Because I love doing a hard thing because it's hardcore.
Yeah.
And it makes me, I don't know, feel like the Terminator or something. I don't know. But whatever the percent, and the thing is, it's different for different people.
Yeah.
Just like shoes are different for, what the shoe you run in is not the shoe I should run in. What motivates me may not be what motivates you. And therefore, I shouldn't rely on what motivates you to motivate me. So find what works for you.
Amen.
And hold on to it.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Well, our trivia question from last week, we had mentioned Sebastian Coe, and he was best known for being a runner back in the 80s. And so the question was, what was his event and what was his fastest race ever? He was my favorite runner of the 80s. Mm-hmm. And the event that he ran middle distance. So he ran 800, 1500. Today, we don't see a lot of runners who run 800, 1500. But back then, almost everybody that ran the 1500 ran the 800. Now it seems like you're more likely to see somebody run 1500 5K than 800, 1500. But anyway, back then, that's what it was. So this is from Wikipedia. It says Sebastian Coe, often referred to as Seb Coe, is a British politician and former track and field athlete. As a middle distance runner, Coe won 4 Olympic medals, including 1,500 meter gold medals in the Olympics in 1980 and 1984. He set 9 outdoor and 3 indoor world records in middle distance track events, including in 1979, setting 3 world records in the space of 41 days. And the world record he set in the 800 meters in 1981 remained unbroken until 1997, and I might add, is still the 3rd fastest time ever. Coe's rivalries with fellow Britons Steve Ovett and Steve Cram dominated middle distance racing for much of the 80s. I do take a little umbrage with that because there were a lot more than just those guys, but they were all British guys, and so there was a big rivalry between them. Following Coe's retirement from athletics, he was a Conservative Member of Parliament from 1992 to 1997. He also is instrumental in leading the 2012 London Olympic bid. And so he works with the London Organizing Committee for the Olympic Games. In 2007, he was elected vice president of the IAAF, which is the track and field governing folks. And then he was elected president eventually. And he is still now the leader of what is now called World Athletics, which is World Track and Field. He's also, in 2012, was appointed pro-chancellor of Loughborough University, where he had been an undergraduate, and then he was eventually appointed chancellor. So he's all over all sorts of things. He's appointed chairman of the British Olympic Association, and he was presented with a Lifetime Achievement Award at the BBC Sports Personality of the Year in December of 2012. In 1979, Coe set 3 world records in 41 days. He set the first 2 in Oslo, Norway at 800 meters at 142.33, the mile at 348.95, then broke the world 1,500 meter record with his 332.03 in Zurich, Switzerland, becoming the first person to hold these 3 records at the same time. In 1981, he set the world record in 800 meters at 141.73. He was so far ahead of his time at that point in time, because that 141.73 is still the 3rd fastest time ever run. And it's less than 1 second off of the current world record today. The world record that he set in the mile is 6 seconds off the world record. but this was only less than 1 second. He was so far ahead of his time in the 800 meters that it was crazy. The weird part is he never won an Olympic gold in the 800 meters. He got beat in both of those Olympics in the 800 meters. Calling one of those particular races, he said, was the worst tactical race he'd ever run in his life. But he won the 1500 in both those Olympics, which he wasn't expected to win. So.
Yeah, I knew his name. I knew that he was. I just knew him as an 800-meter runner, but I didn't know he was still active. Honestly, I didn't know if he was still alive. I didn't know he was as active as he is in politics and in the world running scene. But let's talk a little bit about. I don't know if I've ever picked your brain on this podcast. I don't know if I've ever picked your brain about this. Period. But all through coaching, when we coached together, young athletes, and we helped with the track team and the cross country team. You always are, I shouldn't say we always, I've heard many times that the 800 is one of the hardest distances to run. Why is that? Is it because it's not really a sprint, but it's not really getting into distance?
Yeah. You've heard people describe the 400 meters and how hard the last 100 meters of the 400 meters is. The 800 almost does that on steroids. It's like you have to run. It's never comfortable. Like in a 1500 meters, a mile. Sure. There's a period of comfort. The first couple of laps are comfortable. Yeah. The 800, if you're doing it right, it's never comfortable. Never. Like maybe the first 200 meters doesn't hurt too bad, but after that,
the last six,
and you always feel like you're pushing harder than what feels like you could keep going. And I think that's why the 800 is so hard.
Is there any truth to? Because I heard. Who was it a few years back? Maybe Patton. There's in a lot of races, there's kind of set tactics, but in the 800 meter, it could just be all over the board depending on the race. Is there truth to that?
Yeah, I think there is. There's a lot of truth to that because sometimes 800 meter runners go out really fast that first lap, and then sometimes it lags because nobody wants to take the lead, and it changes the complexion of the race a lot. More so, I think, than a lot of other races. But yeah, and people seem to either be good at 800 meters or not good at 800 meters. And it's just something like you're born with. Yeah. Because I've seen people who should be able to run. I had one of the girls at Dalton State. She had an 800 meter PR that I knew was way off of what I knew she could do. And I worked so hard getting her. And we finally got her to break through. Mostly pretty much to a point where I think maybe she could have run a couple seconds faster, but she ran pretty fast. But it took a lot of mental work. Mm-hmm. For some reason, mentally, the 800 is just really, really tough on people.
Well, probably one of the last workouts I did with you was 800. I was doing 800 repeats one day, and I've never raced the 800. But you're right. If you'll remember, I remember that day vividly. Because I didn't finish the last two. Do you remember that?
Vaguely.
You said you're going to hate yourself tomorrow for this, and you were right. But it was it's that pain just, it gets more, it builds and it builds and it builds to where the last 100 meters, you're like, I can't do this. And that was just in a workout. I can't imagine doing that in a race.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever asked you about that, but you do hear about the 800 meters being one of the more difficult races for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, it's a fun race.
Cool.
Upward Sports equips churches to run self-sustaining sports ministries in their communities. Whether you're a sports fanatic or on staff at a church, Upward Sports will give you all the tools you need to run a first-class sports ministry that allows you to reach families in your community. Upward Sports offers basketball, soccer, flag football, cheerleading, volleyball, baseball, and softball through league and camp offerings. At Upward Sports, we want to help your church make a difference and give you increased opportunities to share the gospel. Learn more today at upward.org. That's upward.org.
All right, we're back, and we're still looking for stories. We're always looking for stories, so don't forget to submit your story if you've thought about it, and please do that. I just got one this morning. So I know that people are still writing stories. So just keep them coming.
So let me throw a PSA out right here. So I had a meeting last week up in Spartanburg at the Upward headquarters, and we were talking about the new app. All the developers were in there, and everybody's just talking way over my head, and I don't understand all that, but I know that what they're coming up with is really cool, and it's going to be top notch for the new app coming out, hopefully in October. But I want to throw out there that and many of the people listening may not even know we have done this in the past, but it's where Run for God was born and grew, is we're bringing back the church model. Mm-hmm. And so the 5K challenge has been taught in churches all over the world, and it's a 12-week Bible study that parallels faith and endurance, and it takes people who have never run to their first 5K. It's where Run for God was born. It's what grew us for the first 10 years, and then obviously Run Club came along. COVID knocked out the church model. Run Club has been what we've been doing for the past 4 years. Well, we're bringing the church model back with the new app and everything. So I'm going to go ahead and start planting the seed in January. If you're out there listening to this and you've always thought, gosh, I would love to learn how to use what I love, the sport of running, to bring others to the knowledge of Christ, or to do a Bible study, or to share this Run Club with other people, this is how you do it. So we want to make a big splash in January with 5K challenge classes starting all over the country. We don't have any details on it yet. We're still building the model of how it's going to work. But if that's you, go ahead and start praying about it. That right now, it's June, about to be July. You got plenty of time to start thinking about it, praying about it. We'll start dripping some details out later in the year. But I want to go ahead and I want you to circle the first week of January 2025 on your calendar. Go ahead and start talking to your church. Say, hey, there's this thing out there, Run for God, Upward Running. I would like to consider doing this in our church this coming January. I dare you.
Yeah. And think about this from a running standpoint. A lot of times when you go, you've mentioned this before, that when you go to a pastor or whoever you need to go to ask about doing a program at church, normally it takes a whole lot of resources, and you're asking for them to kind of go, to let you. This Run Club, this running class is something that you will be able to take and do all yourself. All you need is some space, basically, right? And it'll make a splash without the pastor having to do anything. Right?
Yeah. Pastors love Run for God because a lot of times the video I'm thinking of the Ben Reed video in Ohio, the pastor was actually just a participant in the class. And so, the average class size through the years has been 15 to 20 people. A lot of people don't know that. Yeah. Now, we've had the big 200 people classes, and we've had classes with 2 people. That's the beauty of what we're doing here is it can be as many as you want, or it can be as few as you want. The only thing I say is don't get hung up on numbers. God's going to put there who God puts there, and He's going to put them there for a reason. Just wanted to put that out there. You'll start hearing me talk about it more in the coming months. But it's the church model is coming back like a freight train, and I can't wait for it to get back. We're going to combine Run Club and the church model, which is we're going to combine what got us to where we're at and what has carried us through the past 4 years through the whole pandemic and all that. We're going to combine those two. And it's just, I was in a meeting before you got here. It's really, the opportunities there are just incredible.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic. Well, last week we talked about starting over. And this week we're going to talk about changing directions, which is kind of like starting over, isn't it? This story comes from Julie Wicker. And she's submitted a couple of stories, as she will mention in here before. And these are really good. And this one is called Turn North. Race day came fast. The day I would run my second official half marathon. The training was long and hard, but always an enjoyable process. I woke up feeling at peace with this day. I had already surrendered this race to God and was determined not to pick it back up again. We read in Psalm 118:24, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it." There are so many emotions leading up to this day. You can read my original story titled "Running is My Sacrifice" in podcast number 62 and "I Surrender" in podcast number 213. As I approached the starting line, I saw two friends who were both running the 12K. It was nice to be surrounded by conversation rather than any thoughts that might consume my mind if I allowed them to linger too long. As the race began, I started off at a slow and steady pace and told myself to enjoy every mile. I had a goal in mind. Of course, we all want to PR, right? But ultimately, I needed to make today its own race. Not with my dad at the finish line, but with him as my heavenly angel running with me every step of the way. I took in the breathtaking views of the Waccamaw River. I managed a steady pace over the first two bridges, heading north. As I crossed back over the bridges, headed south, someone in my age group passed me. I could feel myself, mentally, starting to break down. I started getting in my thoughts. I reminded myself that although it would be nice to PR or place, what really mattered is that I finished my race. I needed to focus on God and the race He had for me. I needed to run my own race. Getting in our thoughts is like when Moses and the Israelites wandered around the wilderness in Deuteronomy chapter 2. After 40 years of wandering, God told Moses to turn north, right towards the promised land. Although at the time I was physically heading south, it was almost as if God was telling me to head north. Once the 12K walkers and runners headed to the finish line, there were times I was by myself. I realized I wasn't going to PR, so I gave myself permission to walk the third bridge over the Sandpit River, which was the steepest of the three bridges. I once again took the time to take in the breathtaking views. I used that time to text my family and friends to pray for me. With their prayers and encouraging responses, I started back running and refocusing my thoughts on the mile I was in. We read in 1 Corinthians 9:26, "So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing." With every breathtaking view and supporters along the way, I took lots of pictures. This helps me to look for the joy. Living in a small town, we had our local food truck friends handing out water and our high school high steppers dance team to cheer us on. As I entered my last 2 miles, I started thinking about my mom and daughter who were waiting at the finish line for me. I could feel the emotions building up. As I crossed the finish line, I fell into my mom's arms and embraced a hug. I received my finisher's medal, and for that, I am grateful. I can say I finished. What a blessing. We celebrated with good coffee at our favorite coffee shop. I then spent the afternoon laying by the pool with my daughter and friends. Much needed downtime. I took the next week to recover mentally, spiritually, and physically. I especially needed the mental break. I didn't realize how weary I was from the months of letting my thoughts consume me. My loving and supportive husband hung my finisher's medal. I don't run a lot of races, and I don't hang all my medals. I like to hang the ones that have special meaning. This medal is more important than any finisher's medal, even my marathon. This medal symbolizes much-needed closure and the joy I found that day. As I get out of bed each day, it will be a reminder to surrender.
Man, she paints such a cool picture of what a race day looks like.
Yeah.
You know, she got up, she was nervous, anticipation. She went through a myriad of emotions during the race, talked with her family, took in the views, God's creation, fell into her mom's arms, exhausted, enjoying coffee, and then sitting by the pool and watching the day wind up. That's running. That's walking. That is getting out and enjoying God's creation, and how you can go through every emotion possible. That's the hard thing.
Yeah.
That is doing the hard thing. And then winding the day down, reflecting on what you just did. She paints such a cool picture right there.
In a good positive way, too.
Yeah.
And she was open to allowing her mind to go where it needed to go rather than where she wanted to force it to go. And I think that's one of the best things about what she writes.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't flat say it, but I'm sure at the start of the race, she's like, "What? Why did I do this?"
Yeah.
You know, you go through all the angst emotions, but at the end of the day, it never finishes, why did I just do that?
Yeah.
It always finishes, I'm glad I did that.
Yep.
Your legs are hurt. That's why it's so cool. I think this is probably one of the few things you can do in life where you can be in so much pain. I think about after my first marathon. That night, I was in so much pain. Walking down the stairs backwards. You know, we've talked about this. I went to a Disney Hoop-Dee-Doo review that night. And I was like, you can be in so much pain, and yet it feels so good. Yeah. It's the great thing about this sport.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah, and this is a good lesson to everybody when you go to a race to have, I usually go into a race with two goals. I have an A goal and a B goal, right? I have that A goal of if everything goes great, this is where I want to be, and then I have this B goal of okay, if it doesn't turn out perfectly, here's my secondary goal, and that helps you get through a race a lot of times. You know, a good example, Club Cross Country Championships one year. I remember wanting to break 36 minutes for the race, and it became clear halfway through the race I wasn't going to do that. But then I started focusing on my second goal was placing as high as I could place in my age group, and I started paying attention to the numbers on everybody's back because you have to wear your number on your age on your back in that particular race. And so I just started focusing on that. And in the end, I didn't run very fast. I didn't run nearly as fast as I wanted to run. But I ran well because everybody was struggling that day. It just turned out it was hot and humid and everybody was struggling, and so that was okay. But if I hadn't had that secondary goal and just said, just kind of gave up, well, I probably wouldn't have done as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before, I think, to athletes. Your goal and what you call success should not be the same thing. This is where we get in trouble is, you know, I'm going through this right now. We're starting to plan 24, 25 fiscal year for Run for God Upward Running. And you have to be realistic because if success is your goal and you don't hit your goal, then that means failure. But that's never the case. It's simply you didn't hit your goal. But success is always some lower bar. Now, should you set that bar too low? No. But you should be realistic about what success is. And then a goal is always something much higher than that. It's you don't hit your goal and hear anybody say, "Oh, I was successful." No, they say, "I hit my goal." Yeah. It's two different bars, but the trouble we have a lot of times is we make that the same bar.
Yeah, you're right. That's a good point. Good point. Psalm 118:24 says, "This is the day the Lord has made. We will rejoice and be glad in it."
Pretty simple.
Yeah, and to me, it's one of the most comforting verses in the Bible. It really is, because at the end of the day, this is the ultimate perspective setter, right? It's not just good for a good day or a bad day. This is good for every day, just to realize that no matter what happens today, God made this day. There's no reason to be all worked up and disgruntled and upset. And there's just God made this day, and He made it for a reason. And of course, when you put this verse in context, I don't even know that I realized this verse, because I've heard this verse so many. You hear it all the time. When you put it in context, you realize where this is in Psalms. It's talking about, just prior to this verse, it talks about the rejection of the cornerstone. How much more negative can you get than people are going to reject Jesus, right? But then basically it's like, but nevertheless, this is the day the Lord has made. And so even at the worst of times, it's okay. This is the day the Lord has made. It's just a great reminder.
Good word.
Deuteronomy 2:2 and 3 says, You have made your way around this hill country long enough. Now turn north.
This is one of those verses that I feel like this God says this to me a lot, but he says it in a different way to me. It's, you've been doing it your way long enough. Now do it mine.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I'm convinced God lets us do it our way sometimes so that we can figure out that our way is not the right way. You know, I've had this reminder many, many, many times in my life. I think I know what's right. I'm sensing I know where God's leading me. But God, I need to try it my way. And it's so futile because it never works out.
Yeah.
But yet I'll think it again 3 days later. And it's like we just don't. This is one of those times where I feel like it's God saying, all right.
Yeah.
Shaking you just a little bit. Listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. Well, in this verse too, God, of course, God's telling the Israelites to head north toward the Promised Land, but He tells them to be careful. I think this is so applicable to today. I never noticed this in this passage before. He's telling them to be careful how they deal with the Edomites as they go through that area, and He tells them not to provoke them, which I think is interesting in light of our world today, right? I mean, we've had some stuff going on in the news recently where a lot of people who have similar thoughts to my thoughts are thinking we need to get folks back for what they're doing, right? Which is what? It's provoke. Now, they've done the provoking, but the idea is from a biblical standpoint, how do we look at those things? Because we have these visceral feelings when we hear something that we don't like, especially if it's anti-biblical or anti-fairness or whatever. We have these reactions to it that are they're really emotional. But what does the Bible tell us is the right way to go about responding to those things? And that's really hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think about, I've mentioned the name Larry Anderson on here before. I think about the people in my life. Billy Graham's another one who, man, they modeled this so well. You know, especially somebody like Billy Graham, who was always out, you know, he was out in the public and people were constantly trying to provoke him. I think about Larry, as a young man, in my teenage years, early 20s, he was very pivotal in my life because I would watch Larry. Larry was a great guy. You know, he loved to ride motorcycles. He was a man's man until it come to things that should provoke him. And I say should provoke him by the world standards, know, whether it be political or social or financial or whatever. He would never let those things rattle him. Yeah, and it's that was 20 years ago, and it's 100 times worse now with the news and the media and everybody, all the talking heads. Everything is out there trying to provoke us. But I always go back to people like Larry and Billy Graham. Not getting rattled speaks way more volumes than spouting off whatever we want to say, and that's so convicting because I know for me and you that this is where we both struggle. We want to say what's on our mind. Yeah. But so many times not saying a word speaks louder than anything we could ever say. Yeah.
It makes this topic really tough because on the other hand,
it's a balance. Yeah.
The Bible, my mother always said 2 wrongs don't make a right. Sure. And I believe that, right? Sure. And the Bible kind of illustrates that throughout the Bible, but it also, talks about an eye for an eye, and it talks about also handling things in a little bit different way, in a more pressing way. Jesus turned over the tables in the temples because they were doing something wrong. There's a time, right, to kind of fight back, and that's, to me, that's the hardest part to figure out is when do we respond in a calm way, to your point. And then when do we just let things go and try to be the peacemaker, right? Because there are both of those occasions.
So I've got a theory on that. I think I think the reason the story of Jesus turning the tables is in the Bible, I think the reason that it was so effective probably when it happened is because it was completely out of character.
Mm-hmm.
Me, if I flip that table, well, Mitchell's just a hothead anyway. It would, gosh, it's so convicting to say it.
Yeah.
Me doing something like that, I have to ask myself the question, would people see that as completely out of character? If the answer is no, you probably need to stop doing it.
So, wow, that's powerful.
You know, I used to tell my kids, be the kid who doesn't say much so that when he does, people listen.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was Jesus. Jesus was the ultimate peacemaker.
Yeah.
He was peace. Jesus is love. Jesus is all these things. So when he did what he did in the temple, whoa, people were like, well, we must be doing something really bad because that is not in his character.
Yeah, it's a good point.
We that's the only way that's effective.
Otherwise, it's the boy who cried wolf, right?
Or it's just the next talking head.
Yeah.
In a world full of talking heads, don't be one of those.
Yeah.
You know, when Billy Graham took a stand on something, people really listened.
Yeah, it's true.
And in the same way, when Jesus flipped tables in the temple, that was not his character.
Boy, that's a good point. 1 Corinthians 9:26 says, "So I run with purpose in every step. I am not just shadow boxing." It's a great scripture for this. You know, this section of 1 Corinthians talking about the responsibilities we have in the world to live kind of a non-hypocritical life, right? And that's really difficult in this day and time. But it's what we should strive for.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, in this case, Paul's talking to the people of the church at Corinth about being purposeful and about running that race to win. And that's kind of this. Julie's story here is a good picture of that. You know, she kept coming back to what winning looked like for her on that day. And what it looked like for her was finishing that race with joy. Mm-hmm. And that's what she did. And it's important to enjoy our journey. I think we miss that a lot of times, right? Yeah. We're so focused on crossing things off a list that, okay, I got one done. Now let's go to the next one. Let's enjoy the fact we crossed one off a little bit before we go to that next one, right?
I struggle there a lot. I'm sitting here looking at my check-off list as you're saying that, and you're right. It's so convicting that we are constantly looking. At least I am. I'm always looking at the next thing. I'm always looking at the next meeting, the next task, the next thing to check off. That so many times I don't enjoy where God has me, and I think that's the thing that we miss is God wants us to have joy where we're at. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's the picture. That is what Paul's talking about, is having contentment where you are. We've talked about this a lot. Does it mean we shouldn't have goals? No. But the goals shouldn't consume us. The striving for what's ahead should never steal our joy for where we're at. Yep. And I know for me, a task doer, I struggle with that. Yeah. And, you know, it's hard for me to sit on my back porch in the evening and just ponder the beauty of God. You know, I was sitting out the other night listening, I told you, and I heard the coyotes. I was doing nothing. And I know we talk about this all the time, but you enjoy where God has you right now. The task will always be there. Yeah. But the joy you find in what God has right now will be gone tomorrow.
That's right.
He'll provide something new, but enjoy what he's given you today.
Yeah. Well, and that leads us to the first question is, do you intentionally seek joy? And you've just pointed out some good examples of that. And I like to think that I do. The thing that I see, though, is I see a lot of people out there who are focused on the opposite thing, right? I've been dealing with somebody recently over the past few weeks who you would swear that person is just trying to be as unhappy as they can be. Mm-hmm. It's like everything that happens, let's find the most negative angle we can think of about that thing, mm-hmm. and let's amplify it. Mm-hmm. We have to be careful about that. And you know, I'm one of those people who I like things to be the way I like them to be, and if they're not the way I want them to be, then they're wrong, mm-hmm. right? Yeah. And so I can get pretty worked up about that. Yeah. But we have to catch ourselves and stop and go, whoa, what am I doing? What am I saying? And take a step back. And I think that's really important, and not be one of those people. So, you know, if you look around you and you don't see people around you who are like that, there may be a chance you may be that person. So be careful.
What is it Dave Ramsey says? Everybody's got crazy in their family. If you don't, then that means it's you. Yeah.
You know, sometimes seeking joy, I think, can just being intentional about is about being not doing the opposite. In other words, for example, when I'm in traffic, I want to, you want to react to traffic. Mm-hmm. And sometimes seeking joy is just not reacting to traffic. There's some joy in going, you know what? I'm not going to let that bother me. Mm-hmm. You didn't go out there and do anything necessarily, but you avoided doing the negative thing.
Or letting your mind wander to what that person might be going through.
Yeah.
You know, my wife is great about doing this. She has the gift, and I think she even says this. She calls it a fault. I call it a gift. But she has the ability to see the situation through everybody's eyes. Mm-hmm. That's a gift.
Yeah.
It is not the gift I have.
Nor me.
I typically see it through my eyes. And to your point, if it's not the way I would do it, then I think it's wrong. Mm-hmm. And that is wrong. Mm-hmm. But she has the ability to look at every situation through that hurting mother's eyes, who she's got 3 kids and they're screaming, and what she's probably going through at home. Too many times what I hear is the 3 screaming kids.
Yeah.
And that is something that we all have to work on, is the empathy of doing exactly what Holly is so good at doing. And Debbie's the same way. Yep. They can, that is a gift that God has given them abundantly, and He's probably trying to give it to you and I, and somehow we're rejecting it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean,
we're getting better at it. I think both of us are better at it.
I'm miles better than where I was 5 years ago, 10 years ago, but I've still got 500 miles to go.
Me too.
Yeah.
Another question: is God asking you to turn north? I mean, I think God's always trying to direct us somewhere. And, sometimes He does it with a little gentle whisper, mm-hmm. and sometimes He does it with the 2x4.
Right.
And I find it easier to change direction when He does it with a 2x4. Sure. And He knows I need that a lot of times, and so He provides that. But a lot of times when God gives you that whisper, mm-hmm. it almost feels like it almost feels like He's trying to lead you into something. It's almost the way it feels, it's like the world doing that feels like a trap, mm-hmm. right? God saying, I want you to go this direction. If you want, if this would probably be the direction, probably be best. And, you can feel that gentle urging to go in that direction. But you can also feel like God going, if you can choose not to go that direction if you want to. Mm-hmm. And in the back of your
Beware.
mind. Yeah, yeah. And it just almost feels like a trap, right? Yeah. And so I don't know. I that's the way I thought about this question is that I very often listen to God when He smacks me upside the head with a 2x4, but when He gives me the choice and He kind of just goes, hey, go this way if you want to. Mm-hmm. I should always listen to that the same way I do the 2x4, but I don't, right?
Yeah. The hardest ones for me is not the turn north, because I love it when I hear God say make a change, do something. The hardest ones for me are just stay straight.
Yeah.
You can't see the next street light up there. Just stay doing what you're doing. Because I'm an action person. I'll give me some turns and I'll obey. But it's the stay straight. It's stay doing, which in my mind I hear monotony. It's just the same old thing. And we always say that God answers yes, no, maybe, or yes, no, be patient, or right and left, stay straight. And I don't like the wait. I don't like the maybe. I don't like the stay straight. I feel like, gosh, this is so crude to say this. Sometimes we equate being successful with God is following, and that sounds horrible, being successful with God, but doing what God's saying but sometimes it's doing nothing is success. Doing nothing is what God wants you to do. And for a doer...
And it doesn't feel like it.
Yeah, no, it feels like, because, I mean, think about it. Every other situation in a marathon, if you do nothing, you're not going to be successful.
Yeah.
If you go to a track meet and you sit on the high jump pit for all day, you're not going to be successful. So it's so counter to our culture that sometimes God wants us to do nothing. But in a culture where we're doing, that's probably the hardest one for me, is to do nothing, to not turn, to just wait, to not now. You know, that was the hardest thing I heard growing up, is not now.
Yeah.
Mom, can I go get whatever? Not now. Well, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know, is it tomorrow? Is it the next? I start asking all these questions, and I do the same thing with God.
Yeah.
And I'm learning that just keep your mouth closed, and that GPS direction will pop up at some point.
Yep.
But just wait and enjoy where you're at right now.
Yep.
There's a theme here, I think.
Yeah, there is. Last question. What daily reminders do you need? I like when God shifts direction for me, for that very reason, what you're talking about. When God shifts direction, you feel like you're doing something, right? But you always have to be listening for that to see it. You mentioned the GPS thing. You know, I never thought about this before, but on my GPS, I turn the sound off. I don't want the sound. I don't want it interrupting other stuff I might be listening to. I don't want. I'm looking at the screen. That's all I need. I don't need you to tell me.
I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
I've got to do that.
Yeah.
I hate that.
Yeah. I turn mine off. I don't listen to it.
Yeah.
And on the other side of that coin is that drives Debbie crazy, right?
Really?
Debbie wants to hear it, because she gets her direction. The way that she receives and executes direction works better through that spoken word, whereas mine works better through that picture. And so we have to be ready to listen to God in all His forms. Sometimes He's showing us something. Sometimes He's saying it, but we have to be ready for both, right?
Yeah. But have we got the volume turned down?
That's
or not the volume turned down, but we've got other things louder.
Yeah.
That's probably more accurate. Man, that's good, Dean.
Yeah.
That's good.
Upward Sports Run for God Run Club is the best way to stay motivated for your fitness journey and your faith journey. You get these weekly podcasts, but there is so much more. We have proven training plans available for you, whether you're just at the beginning of your fitness quest or you've been running for 20 years. We have something for everyone, and it doesn't matter where you are with God either. We have something for you there, too. If you're not a member, join today at runforgod.com. It is the best value you will find. All right, here's a great story. This is from CBS News. When Derek Stefureac, I don't know if I'm saying his name right, but was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, a chronic disease that affects the central nervous system, he was a smoker who never exercised. Everything changed when he had an attack at work when he was 39. His body seized up for about a minute, and Stefureac told CBS News that he thought he was dying. After seeing multiple doctors, he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. We've all heard of MS, but I have to admit I don't know that much about it. But it is a disease that it has no cure, and over time it gets worse, and your body degenerates over time. And so what the doctor told him he needed to do is he said, you need to get healthy. The best way to slow the disease down is to become as healthy as you can, and so he's okay. So he quit smoking and he started jogging in an effort to become healthier. So here, now, 13 years after his diagnosis and those initial jogging sessions, Stefureac has run 36 marathons, including one in Antarctica and one on Mount Everest. After completing Australia's Brisbane Marathon earlier in June, he's now run a marathon on every continent. He's built a community of runners connected with others with his condition, and his doctors say he's even managed to reverse the progression of his multiple sclerosis.
Wow.
And according to the multiple sclerosis is a disease that affects the central nervous system, according to the Mayo Clinic's website. The immune system attacks the myelin, or protective sheath, that covers nerve fibers. That causes communication problems between the brain and the rest of the body, causing a wide range of symptoms, including numbness and weakness in the body, and an unsteady gait, blurry vision, and more. Eventually, it can cause permanent damage or deterioration of the nerve fibers. So this is a serious thing, of course. We've known that. And apparently he first noticed that he might have a problem when he started dragging his foot. He couldn't understand why he was doing that. And then they go and they find these spinal lesions, which normally means disability follows. Almost immediately you start having serious disability issues. But he just keeps running. And now he has no symptoms, and he hasn't had symptoms in years because he just keeps running. I think it's amazing. And he wants to do some other stuff. He's looking at a North Pole marathon, running one at Mount Kilimanjaro. He wants to participate in more intense events like a 5-day race across the Sahara Desert and an Ironman triathlon in Hawaii. And what he's doing is he wants to inspire others to become more active. And this is the part that I love the most. This is from him, his quote. He says this: "It sounds insane, but for me, I'm grateful for the diagnosis. It really was an eye-opener, and it turned my life around. I don't think I'd be doing 7 continents if I never had been diagnosed with MS," Stefureac said. No one could ever know I have MS. People are shocked when I tell them. I'd like to be a good example of, like, this could be you.
Just hearing this, I'm thinking of a little sign that Gay has. It's either hanging up behind her desk or it's on her desk. But she has a little saying, and it says, "I don't run to add days to my life. I run to add life to my days."
Yeah.
That's exactly what he's talking about here.
Yeah.
This was simply a perception change. We just talked about perception earlier. He took what many people would consider bad news, and he used that to motivate himself to change his ways, to have a much fuller life. I mean, think about how backwards that sounds. You have a better life now that you have MS than you did before.
Yeah, it's crazy, isn't it?
But that is simply his situation is no different than somebody who gets MS and thinks it's over, and they probably go downhill much faster.
And they're in a wheelchair 13 years later.
The diagnosis is exactly the same. Mm-hmm. What's different? It's the outlook, it's the perception, it's what you do with that news that's many times the game changer. It's not necessarily the running. I'm going to step out on a limb and say it's not necessarily the running that made his life all that much better. It's that he has hope.
Mm-hmm.
The running is simply giving him hope, and hope is probably one of the most powerful things on earth. Mm-hmm. Without it, we join the world. I've talked about when I was going through chemo at 19 years old. I quickly learned that I did not want to be in that chemo room, when the room where they were giving me chemo, because I looked around and I could see it. Most of the people were much older than I was. Chemo back then was very different than it is now. And you've heard me talk about, I would take my IV cart and I would go walk around the parking lot. Mm-hmm. I saw a lack of hope.
Yeah.
But when you have something that gives you hope, and running can be that means, it's just a game changer.
Yeah.
I'm convinced that's the only difference between, was it Derek? Derek
yeah.
and so many other people is simply the perspective.
Yep. Yeah. So this is a good lesson to all of us to look at things in the right perspective. When things don't go well, instead of packing things in and going, oh, it's the end of the world, find a positive way to handle it.
When life gives you lemons,
make lemonade. All right, it's a time for Dean's Thoughts. And that's a time when I share something I've written about the intersection between running and faith.
So we're going to get canceled here.
Maybe.
I have a feeling.
We try to stay away from controversy, but I'm going to head straight for one of the most controversial subjects on the planet. This one is called shopping carts and running. I try not to comment on current cultural things, but something caught my eye, and I think it's relevant to both our fitness journey and our faith journey. It's a very sensitive subject, so let me apologize up front if I step on any toes here. The incredibly touchy subject I'm talking about, of course, is returning your shopping cart to the cart corral. I know what you're thinking. Dean, you've written well over 300 Dean's Thoughts without wading into such controversial territory. Why start now? Well, let me just say, I know, but it's such a good illustration that I just can't help myself. There are 4 categories of shopping cart users. 1, those who always return their cart because they view it as their duty to do so. 2, those who return the cart when it's convenient, but not if it's going to take any real extra effort. 3, those who will return their cart if they think someone is looking and will think less of them if they don't. And then 4, those who never return their cart under any circumstances because they believe it is the store's responsibility. Of course, if you're in any category other than the first one, you are contributing to the downfall of civilization. If we reach a tipping point and too many people migrate out of the responsible category, a Mad Max scenario is surely right around the corner. There are many excuses for not returning your shopping cart. The corral is too far away. My foot hurts. It's raining. Or it's too cold. Or it's too hot. I don't want to leave my children unattended. Or my personal favorite, I'm leaving it here for the next person. And there are 1,000 of other alleged reasons for people to shirk their clear responsibility to hold civilization together. But none of them are good. Now, to be clear, I have left a shopping cart outside of its designated place. I'm no angel, but I haven't done it in a long time. As a matter of fact, I often try to make up for others by taking a couple of carts back into the store from the parking lot when I arrive. I figure I'm going that way anyway. So you can see that I am serious about shopping cart management. The question is, why? I think the shopping cart dilemma is very similar to both our fitness and faith journeys. Why is it hard to get out and keep yourself fit through running and or walking? Well, it's for the same reason that we don't return our shopping carts. It's not convenient enough. It's too hot. I don't have time. There are 1,000 reasons why people don't keep themselves fit. And like the shopping cart thing, none of them are really good excuses. Will it take effort? Yes. Just like returning the shopping cart. You can make excuses, or you can just get out there and get it done. Now, unlike returning shopping carts, there are times when you can't run, an injury, for example. But make sure you're not using an excuse that sounds good on the surface, but is really not a good excuse. The one we hear all the time with shopping carts is, I don't want to leave my child in the car unattended while I return the cart. On the surface, it sounds great. I care about my child. Seems like a good reason. But we have key fobs that allow us to lock and unlock our car in an instant if we're really concerned. All I'm saying is that we should make every effort to return our cart, and we should make every effort to get our workouts in. If it doesn't happen due to circumstances we could not overcome, fine. But make sure the circumstances really are that dire before giving up because it's hot outside today. We're pretty good at excuses for our lack of time with God, too. I'm too busy. I can't find a church I like. I don't know how to pray. And my personal favorite, there are too many hypocrites in church. God wants to spend time with us, both at church and in our personal lives. There are many ways to do it, and there are even more ways to avoid it. If you have a tough time finding time for God, what are your reasons? Are you making plausible sounding excuses but getting little time with God? If so, you might want to take a step back from those excuses and find a way, even if it's hard. We tend to over-dramatize things. For some of us, it's making excuses to skip a workout. For others, it's allowing yourself to be burdened by the complexity of life and missing your time with God. I've run every day but one for almost 13 years. I know there's a way to find time to do the things you want to do. And I'm convinced that, no matter how busy life is, you can too. What do you think? Too controversial?
I think that's one of your best ones.
Yeah?
Good job, Dean. Yeah, very good. Yeah, I mean, it's so, I would have never thought of that analogy, but it's spot on.
Yeah.
They should do, I mean, how many more people don't return their shopping cart today versus 20 years ago? I would love to know that statistic.
That would be interesting to know.
I bet it's a huge rise.
Do you think?
The percentage is much higher today than it was 20 years ago.
Because people are so self-focused, you think?
Yeah, I mean, we are. It's just, that's a fact.
Well, I figure with your orderliness, you probably always return your cart.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I figured you. And does it bother you when you get up to like at the local grocery store, you have two different size carts? And so you get up there and
they're in the wrong line.
Yeah, you got mixture of both.
Oh, sure.
Oh, my gosh, it drives me.
I'll tell you the other one that this is kind of along the same thing. And hear me when I say I have my faults. There are things that I do that I'm sure drive people crazy. But people parking in handicap that aren't handicapped, that is probably one of my biggest pet peeves. And I'm going to be transparent here. I did something. Gosh, I shouldn't say this. There was one time I was at a school function and somebody that I knew who was obviously not handicapped was parked in a handicap spot. What got me so upset is that I parked, 200 yards from the school or whatever it was. We were going there for a function at the school where all the parents were coming. I was walking to the school through the grass and through the parking lot beside a guy. We started talking who was on a cane.
Oh,
I mean, this guy was probably 80. Super guy. I mean, we talked the whole way in, but when we got near the school, I saw a person that I knew parked in the handicap spot. I don't know what happened. It's like I just got so upset about this because the guy I was walking with didn't have a parking spot. Now, the thing about it, the lesson here is that guy probably would not have parked in one of those spots.
Right. That's true.
He parked but I wrote on the driver's side window. It was kind of dusty. I wrote not handicapped. And when my wife found out I did, because I was telling her about it, I was like, I'm contributing to society. I told this person they're not handicapped. She got so mad at me.
Yeah, I bet.
She was so upset because what I did was wrong. It was.
Yeah.
To your point, all these things, I say it a lot. It seems like nobody cares nowadays.
Yeah.
And I, like I said, I'm throwing stones, but some ought to be thrown back at me at the same time. Yeah. Returning your shopping cart, man, that is a great illustration. It's a great test of where we are as a society.
Well, let me give everybody out there that now my wife, she thinks about stuff. You know what my wife does? She parks close. She finds a parking place close to the cart corral.
Really? That's the last place you want to park.
Well, that's where she wants to park so that she can return her cart easily because she doesn't want to not return her cart.
But that's where your car gets dinged
well,
up.
maybe not necessarily right next to it. But
park uphill from it. Always park uphill from the cart corral. You know those shopping
Good
carts,
idea.
and that wind blows.
You know, the thing that strikes me about this, and this is what triggered me to write this, was that I was hearing this statistic because they were talking about, because I was listening to a talk show guy and he was getting grief over this because he has the same feelings about it that I do. And somebody was talking about, don't get on to me if I don't want to leave my child in the car. And so he was looking very specifically at this, at that particular one. And the truth is that in whatever year, I can't remember what year it was, and I can't remember the exact number, but it was somewhere around a little over 250 abductions from cars have happened in this one particular period of time, which is not many, right? And most of those child abductions out of cars were done by people who knew them, right? So your chances of somebody coming by and taking a child is infinitesimally small. It is way smaller than the chance of you having a wreck and dying in a wreck on the way to the grocery store. Yet people use that as this excuse.
Yeah.
And we do this with everything. We take these things that are not really good excuses, but we take this virtue signaling stand and say, well, I care about my child, and so I'm not going to do that. And we do it in everything we do.
We use the exception, not the rule, as the example.
Yeah.
A lot of the hot button topics out there today, it's we use the extreme to justify the normal. You know, I just heard about this last week. Some friends of mine went to Disney, and you know, Disney is not the banner of example that we want to use, but Disney did something that really surprised me, and it's the shopping cart idea. You know, used to, if you were in a wheelchair, Disney, you went right to the front of the line. You know, they didn't want you sitting, but they stopped doing that. You know why? Because so many people were getting wheelchairs going into the park. They were renting wheelchairs outside the park and rolling them in and acting like they were disabled so that they could go to the front of the line. Yeah. Disney caught on, and so, I mean, this was a pretty non-Disney stance that they took, and they said, no more. And so now if you're truly disabled, you can't go to the front of the line, which I don't like that either. But I see where Disney's coming from. These type decisions have forced us to have to make other hard decisions. This is very thought-provoking, your story here.
And we do all this with running too. We make excuses. We can't go outside. I was just talking with somebody recently who they just can't run when it's over 80 degrees outside. It's just too hot for them. I'm like, millions of people run with it being over 80 degrees outside. You're not the exception. You're not the person who can't handle it. Now, is it hard? Yes, it's hard. Right. I get it. It's hard. You don't want to do it. But sometimes we got to do things we don't want to do. And quit making excuses on why you can't do something when it's not a really good excuse.
Right.
Again, I'm not throwing stones, because there are certainly, I have failures every day. Lord knows I have so many failures and so many shortcomings. But when we recognize it, and we should try to recognize it, we should try to do something about it. And if we're missing our tasks on our fitness journey because we're making some excuse, quit doing that. Just get out there and do it. It's
just hard truth that our society doesn't want to hear. And don't get me wrong, hard truth is hard to hear. I've had hard truth spoken to me, and I don't like it. You know, I've always said the greatest sermons my pastor preaches is when I leave kind of mad at him. And I've told him this, but it's what I need to hear. And a lot of times, in a lot of circles nowadays, that has that is it's fallen in the category of hate speech.
Yeah.
For truth.
Yeah.
And truth is truth. There's no your truth. There's no my truth. There is only truth.
Period.
And we probably need to step off the soapbox right there. But truth is truth.
Yeah. And the other thing about these excuses is don't use excuses. Don't say you're too busy to read your Bible. Just Don't say that, because it's not true. It's just not. And again, stepping on my own toes, like you're talking about. But we've got to quit making excuses for not doing things God wants us to do.
Sure. Good word.
At Upward Sports and Run for God, we're all about helping you on your fitness journey. But we also want to support you on your faith journey as well. Sign up today for the self-paced Bible in a Year Challenge and listen every day as I read through the entire Bible in 365 episodes. As a bonus, I also give you running and walking tips of the day and finish with a different encouraging quote in each episode. You must be a Run Club member to participate in this exciting and edifying challenge. Sign up and start listening today. Every week I share a reason why running and or walking is so awesome. And this week, there are unknown, what I call micro benefits to running and walking. We just talked about Derek and his MS. That's an obvious thing where you can see the benefits and you can measure how well he's done. But the truth is, if you're taking time to do any kind of exercise, any kind of aerobic work especially, you're making improvements to the way your body works, period. Now, you may not see them. You may not know they're there. You may not even be able to measure them, but they're there.
Sure.
And when you go out the door for a run, you will come back a healthier person, period. Every time you go out to run, you're coming back better than when you left. Now, you're breaking down some muscle tissue and you may be sore and all that, but all of that is leading to a better you. And so you just need to realize that every time you go out and you go for a run, you go for a walk, you go for a bike ride, you go for a hike, you do any of these things, you are making yourself healthier and better. And so if you look at it that way, to me, it makes it a little easier to get
You
out
have
the
to
door.
tear something down before you can build it back better.
Right. That's right. Well, NCAA track and field is over, and now it's time for the Olympic trials, and I'm so looking forward to it. Did you watch any of the NCAA stuff?
Every minute. Not really. No.
Well, the NCAAs, they were really exciting things. The NCAA came down to the University of Florida, won the team title on the last event by 1 point.
What was the last event?
4x4.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's always a 4x4, right? And their team was actually depleted a little bit. They didn't have their best runners on there, and they thought, it's going to be a stretch. They had to get at least third. Well, they were leading the thing most of the way, and then on the last leg, the guy gets passed by two people, and they're coming down the stretch, and you're like, because if the fourth guy catches them, they don't win.
Yeah.
And they lose by 1 point instead of winning by 1 point. And they held on and they won. So it was really exciting.
You know why I don't follow professional sports? I mean, professional running. You know why?
Why?
Don't you? Because you're so good at summarizing it each and every week that
you don't need to.
Me and many other people don't have to watch it because you need to go into running journalism. I guess that's kind of what you are, but you're good at it.
Yeah.
So thanks, Dean. I don't have to. I get that time back in my week because you're so good at summarizing it.
Well, the NCAA women's title came down also to the last event. And the Arkansas women's 400-meter runners are absolutely incredible. They took first, second, third, and fourth in the open 400. They have four ladies who can run under 50 seconds.
Wow.
I mean, you run under 50 seconds, you're on the Olympic team pretty much, right? And they've got four of them, and it's incredible. They had set the record, the 4x4 record, prior to this race, and in this race they cut another 4 seconds off the 4x4 record. They ran 3:17, which is an average of 49 seconds per leg.
Wow.
Which is absolutely astounding. As a matter of fact, it's the fourth fastest time in history. The only teams that have run faster are the United States national team and the Soviet Union national team back in 1988 and the German national team of 1984. Those are the only teams that have run faster than this college team.
Let me ask a question about excuse me. Let me ask you a question about 4x400 teams.
Yeah.
Does 4 super fast 4x400 runners always equal a really super fast 4x400 team? Let me explain. Let's say if you take the fastest 4x400 runner from Arkansas, the fastest one from Texas, you take the anchor legs of 4 different teams and you put them together. Is that always going to equal a much faster 4x400 team? And the reason I'm asking is, how much does friendship, working together, is it all about the running, or is it how well a team? You see what I'm saying? It's a team sport, so much of it is how they gel.
Yes.
If they don't like each other, and it's how much of non-running plays into it.
Well, and in the 4x4, what I think makes the biggest difference is not. Obviously, you have to be talented. You have to be able to run fast. But I can't remember her name right now. It's escaping me. But back a few years ago, when the United States was running against the Netherlands, and Femke Bol was running the anchor leg for the Netherlands, you thought we had no chance to win that race because Femke Bol is gonna beat her. There's just, there's no way, right? But I think the drive and the competitiveness and the fact she was representing the country and a team made her run faster than she normally could have possibly run. And she wound up beating her. And I think Femke Bol actually dropped the baton, but she beat her. And I think that a lot of the 4x4 comes down to what's your reason. I think that's why the Florida men, I think that's why they ran so fast. They're running for an NCAA title. I think they overachieved because they knew what they were trying to accomplish. And so I think the 4x4 is 2 things. Yes, you take the fastest 4x4.
What I'm saying is, if you take, let's use 1 minute as the example for easy math. You take the top 4 runners from all different parts of the world who can all run 1 minute. That doesn't necessarily always equal a sub 4 minute 4x400 because of how.
Not necessarily, yes. Right,
okay.
Right.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. It's an interesting thought.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Some others that I think might have a shot at we got the Olympic trials coming up. And so there's always somebody from the NCAAs that comes in and makes a splash at the Olympic trials. And Mackenzie Long, she's a sprinter from Ole Miss. I found this out yesterday. She's 24 years old.
Wow.
She's like a 6th-year senior.
She got those COVID years, didn't she?
Yeah. But she won the 100 and the 200 and anchored Ole Miss to the 4x4 or 4x1 championship as well, I think. But she ran super fast. And so I'm looking forward to Mackenzie Long and seeing what she can do. She's got a really touching story. Her mother passed away recently, and so it's been a struggle for her through the season, and it turned out really well. The men's 1500 is a really stacked field. It should be interesting to see if any of those guys can break into the Olympics. Joe Wascom won that race for the second time. We'll see if any of those guys, because there's a whole bunch of them that are really good. And there's always some surprises. The other thing too about the NCAAs is that's interesting is that a lot like this Arkansas team, only 2 of the ladies on the Arkansas team are American. So one of them is British, and the other one is Jamaican. So they're probably going to make their teams in their other countries, and so you see that a lot too. A lot of these NCAA people, they show up. They don't show up in United States uniforms.
Yeah.
Which seems crazy, right?
It's true.
Yeah. But anyway, we may have to do a special Olympic trials podcast when that comes up.
Well, I'll tell you, I will go ahead and say, and you need to go ahead and make the phone call. I'm going to yield my chair that week to Co Booker. So you and Co do the Olympic trials episode.
Do the Olympic trials episode.
Because he will be much more interesting and knowledgeable.
He is a knowledgeable dude.
He is, yeah.
Yeah, he's really good at it. Well, another thing that I was thinking about recently, I'm noticing that running shoes have changed a lot over the last several years. And maybe it's only because I've had to look for a new running shoe over the last year. I wore the same pair basically for like 80 pairs of shoes.
Sure.
and I made one change in the middle of that, but it was a weird thing that happened, but it was basically the same thing. But shoes have become way softer than they've ever been before. Matter of fact, I've got on a pair of shoes right now that I can't even run in them because they're too soft. They actually hurt my feet. They're so soft. Except when I walk in them, they feel great.
Yeah.
So that's changed. The other thing that I noticed is that they have the shoes now have this rocking thing. Do yours have that?
Yeah. I mean, I told you about I run in the Cumulus and the Asics Cumulus, and I bought 2 pair the last time I bought shoes, and they were drastically I didn't think it was this. It's not the same shoe. It's not, Cumulus is 20 years old, I guess.
Yeah.
And they changed it and they moved to the rocker bottom, which surprised me because I thought they would have came up with a new model and not actually changed a 20-year-old model that drastically. But the shoes that I bought last time, it's just not the same shoe as before. But yeah, they went to the rocker bottom and much more cushiony, like you said. It feels great, but I've had some issues out of it.
I remember the first time I tried, because I think Hoka was the originator of that whole rocker bottom thing.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I tried those on, I was like, I don't like this at all. Now, I love it. It's funny what we get used to. Well, how about a trivia question? We have to stick with track and field for a while. I mean, it is that time of the year where we're coming up to the Olympics. So here's a question. How many hurdles are there in a standard hurdles race? Now, when I say standard, the standard distances are 100 and 110 meters and the 400-meter hurdles. How many hurdles are there in those races? So if you know the answer to that, and you're the first one to respond to dean@runforgod.com, and you are a member of Run Club, then you will win $20 off in the Run for God store. So how many hurdles are there in a standard hurdles race?
I don't know the answer to that. I could guess pretty close, but I don't know. Yeah.
We have a motivational thought of the week. It comes from a guy named Chad Wright. He's an ultra runner, and there is a documentary out called 1 Mile Out that he's in, and this is what he said. He said, "It's a privilege in life to be completely obliterated, in terrible pain, and to force yourself to get up and get back in the fight. That's how you grow, man."
That is, I love that.
Isn't that good?
It is, yeah.
I loved it, yeah. This is this documentary, 1 Mile Out, is it's about a 250-mile race through Arizona. And he's kind of in that documentary.
Is that on like Netflix, or where's that at?
I want to say it is Netflix, but I'm not sure. I haven't seen it, but I want to go. I want to go watch it. But I saw this quote and I thought, "Gosh, that's so good."
You got to be careful with some of these documentaries, though.
That's true.
Language gets pretty rough in them.
Yeah, it does. It does. Yep. All right. 222 episodes. 222. Now,
my wife's going to be doing cartwheels when we hit 333 because that's her favorite number. For whatever reason. That's her favorite number.
So a couple of years from now.
Yeah, she was very sad when the Walnut Avenue, when they changed the exit numbers years ago. It used to be 333. You remember that?
Yeah. I thought it is 3. It's 333 now. It used to be something else, right? Yeah, it's 333, right? I think that's right.
Walnut Avenue's 340. Maybe it is 333.
Yeah,
now.
It's 333.
Okay, when they made the change, she was okay.
Yeah, she was excited about the change because they changed it. Because at one time it was like exit number 60 something.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, they went by exit numbers instead of mile markers. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. 333 is your favorite number, though.
All right. Well, it's coming up. Until next week, may God bless every step of every run and or walk. Go out there and shine your light.
Good job, Dean.
For more information about the Run for God ministry, go to runforgod.com. If you have questions about your salvation, click on the Peace with God tab. There's nothing more important. Thanks for joining us today.